On Christmas Eve 1971, Lanza Flight 508 flew into a severe thunderstorm over the Peruvian Amazon. At 10,000 feet, a lightning bolt struck the right wing, causing the Lockheed Electra turboprop to disintegrate in midair. 17-year-old Juliane Koepcke was thrown from the cabin into the freezing black sky. Still strapped to her 3-seat row, she fell nearly 2 miles toward the jungle canopy below. When she regained consciousness the next morning, she was alone on the rainforest floor. It was the peak of the wet season. She had a broken collarbone, a deep gash in her arm, a severe concussion, and one eye swollen shut. Her only supplies were a single bag of candy. She was a severely injured teenager stranded in a remote wilderness. Surviving the deadliest lightning strike aviation disaster in history had already pushed the limits of probability. Now she had to navigate her way back to civilization. But Juliane had grown up in these woods.
She was the daughter of Hans Wilhelm and Maria Koepcke, 2 pioneering zoologists who had raised her at Panguana, a remote research station deep in the Amazon. As she lay in the mud, she recognized the calls of tinamou birds and the croaks of local tree frogs. To Juliane, this wasn't a hostile wilderness. It was a familiar biological classroom. Her survival over the next 11 days would depend on the specific ecological rules her parents had spent years teaching her. Physics preserved her life. The 3-seat bench acted as a parachute, beginning a rotational spin that created aerodynamic drag, slowing her descent. Then, the dense, multi-layered canopy caught the seats, cushioning the final impact. The same rainforest ecosystem that posed a threat to her on the ground functioned as the mechanical system that saved her from the sky. Once Juliane was on her feet, she followed her parents' first rule for the Amazon. The primary dangers are the things you can barely see. Insects, bacteria, and chemical defenses are more likely to be lethal than apex predators. Despite her hunger, she avoided the brightly patterned frogs in the trees. She recognized the vibrant colors as a biological warning that the animals were poison dart frogs, carrying toxic secretions that would be fatal if ingested. A different threat was visible on her own body. Parasitic flies had laid eggs in the open wound on her arm. Maggots were beginning to hatch and feed on her flesh, risking a systemic infection that her immune system couldn't fight alone. Juliane recalled a technique her father used to treat their dog for a similar parasitic infection. He had used petroleum to flush the organisms out. On the 10th day, she found an abandoned boat with a small motor. She siphoned the gasoline and poured the fuel directly into her arm. The chemicals forced the parasites to the surface, allowing her to remove 35 maggots from the wound. By treating her body like a biological specimen, she managed to stop an infection that would have otherwise led to sepsis. Her navigation was guided by a single geographic principle her parents had emphasized: moving water eventually leads to people. Using this logic, she followed a tiny creek downstream. The stream merged into a wider tributary. Trusting the river basin's drainage pattern, it eventually deposited her at a major river and a lumberjack camp, leading to rescue. Applying the logic of a watershed ultimately placed her at that camp on day 11. The rescue was followed by a grim discovery. Investigators found that 14 other passengers, including Juliane's mother, had also survived the initial fall. They died in the jungle while Juliane was walking for help. As she recovered, Juliane became the subject of intense media scrutiny. Peruvian and international magazines published sensationalized accounts of her ordeal, often misrepresenting her actions and ignoring the scientific training that actually saved her. She spent years struggling with the weight of being the sole survivor. The trauma of the crash was compounded by the knowledge of how close her mother had been to rescue. Navigating the public scrutiny and the loss of her mother would take far longer than the 11-day walk out of the jungle. In time, Juliane reconciled with the landscape. She viewed the Amazon as the same biological system that broke her fall, an environment following its own mechanical rules. She didn't leave the rainforest behind. After moving to Germany to earn a PhD in biology, Juliane returned to Peru. She took over her parents' work and currently serves as the director of the Panguana Research Station. Under her management, the station has supported over 300 scientific papers. She now uses her position to work with local communities and protect the surrounding primary forest from deforestation.
Juliane's career turned her survival into a permanent legacy. She has spent the last 50 years ensuring the ecosystem that gave her a second chance at life is preserved for the next generation of researchers.